here, of course, on Court TV. Philip Dubé with us. Philip, the judge said you got to be here, dude, to hear your sentence. It was odd that he was able to sit out his trial, or am I off base? We just don't see it very often.
Believe it or not, it comes up more often than you know. A defendant absolutely has a constitutional right to be present during his own criminal trial, but he can also waive his presence. And by the way, he doesn't have to expressly do it. He can do it through his misconduct and his misdeeds in open court. If he's carrying on and acting like a fool, the judge can deem him to have absented himself and proceed in his absence. However, the rules change at sentencing. The court can force him to be present when judgment is ultimately rendered. And that rule exists for a couple of reasons. Number one, you have to make sure under the law that you have the right person who is being convicted and sentenced to prison. Second of all, in most states, in their state constitution and in their bodies of statutory law, victims and victims' representatives have the right to confront a defendant and the court and explain the impact that the crime had on them and their loved ones. And so he needs to be there to hear it. If he refuses, the judge can issue an extraction order. And what that means is the custodial officials at the jail where he's housed will physically bring him to court. If he starts resisting, they will bodily remove him from his jail cell and force him onto a transport bus or into a van and physically bring him into court. I've seen it where inmates double down, they dig in, and they just absolutely refuse to cooperate, and they have 4 or 5, big strapping burly bailiffs bringing the guy on a gurney into court strapped down so he can hear the judgment. I'm not going to say it goes on every day, but it's common enough where courts have rules in place on how to deal with it, and so do the arresting agencies. They have the equipment, and oftentimes they even have a camcorder going so you can see in real time how a defendant is behaving, and certainly it relieves the custodial officers of any liability should the inmate file a civil rights lawsuit later. But at the end of the day, they're performing a lawful duty in honoring a court order of extraction to bring the guy into court. And we'll see what happens. Hopefully he doesn't resist, because frankly it could get ugly.
Yeah, it could be like a Hannibal Lecter-y thing,
yeah,
with a mask and
yeah.
Well, let's talk Chad and Lori a little bit. We were seeing those text messages this morning here, and again, they're on an extended break there in Idaho. As soon as they're back, we'll get you back in the courtroom. What did you take away most from the back and forth pre-Tammy's death here?
Oh, it reminded me of a scene out of Glee Club. You have like high schoolers going steady, arguing, going back and forth about their love for each other. It was so childish and obnoxious, frankly. There's an old line in relationships. We say there's a fine line between love and nausea. And they were behaving like a bunch of high schoolers or a couple of high schoolers, But if you notice, it seemed like Chad was the one who was harnessing Lori. He was the one reining her in, taking control of the situation, and I think it was obvious that he knew just how fragile she was and how enamored she was with him and would do anything to make him happy. And he knew the lines, he knew the buzzwords, he knew what to do to lure her to him, and she fell for it. And I think a lot of it had to do with her mental instability. And again, it doesn't exonerate her or excuse the behavior, but it explains it, and that certainly had nothing to do with why the court took death off the table, but I could see how a jury, had it gone to a penalty phase, would have rendered a life verdict on her behalf in light of her mental state.
Yeah, when she ghosted him and he kind of threatened her, well, I can't guarantee your safety then from the gods and from Grandpa Keith.
Exactly.
He was totally manipulating a person who was gone deep. All right, we need a break. Philip, as always, thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day. We'll get a break here. When we come back, we'll head to Idaho, plus an update on Karen Reed coming up in the next hour.